I'm sure that you will hear from the experiences and perspectives that our panel will share today. And then with this suggestion, I would like to make the framework of our conversation today. And the framework question is how regenerative place-based leadership in Latin America can reconcile cultural differences, ecological stewardship, and legal structures to co-create sustainable futures rooted in the soul of a place and the common interest of living in peace. So now, with this framework, you should know that we share with our guests, our panelists, multiple questions as suggestions to share their experiences and expertise with us. Feel free to choose one or some of them and answer and share your experience. I have to say all of them have worked in Mexico in different projects for more than a decade. So I think it's great to see that work is happening in Latin America, and it's an incredible opportunity to build common resilience from there. So to start, I would like to invite Dr. Gerardo Ceballos to jump in. Dr. Gerardo Ceballos is a Mexican distinguished environmental scientist in Mexico. He has a huge background in science, but also in action. I don't want to take out the time reading his biography because it's huge. But I would like to give you just one idea to keep in mind. He has helped Mexican community to protect the equivalent to 2% of Mexican surface, and he contributed for the creation of the first Mexican law in their jurisdiction. So from there,
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Alejandra. It's a pleasure to be with you all. And I'm new to this area. But when Alejandra told me and invited me about speaking with you, I was excited because what I want to do today is just explain briefly what is my background and what we have done. And when I was reading the key question, basically, I'm a scientist. But anyway, it's, as a scientist, this is what we're looking for. I think that you are all perfectly agree, understand that this is the most challenging time for humanity in the whole history of us. And it's the real possibility of a collapse of civilization within the next decades. It's a real threat. And we have seen this all the time. So basically, we have here two important things. On the one hand, how can we put together our act to work against the tide? In the last 6-8 years, I have never seen the conditions of the planet, the condition of the leadership in terms of global climate change, extinctions, and so on, so far away from what we should be doing. I don't see any institution, any country, any big corporation doing what we have to do to really turn the tide on the one hand. But on the other hand, what we have seen, I was, for instance, so impressed by what happened with Jimmy Kimmel program in the US, how an amazing amount of people turn, even if they don't want to see these shows, turn the tide against imposition. We live in a time where we can see, we are looking at the last governments of the 20th century who are dictatorship, autocratic, and so on. And I haven't seen for a long time so much disrespect to nature. But on the other hand, being here with you today gives me a lot of hope that we can turn the tide. I'm a biologist, I'm an ecologist working at the National University of Mexico, doing research, basic research on science that I love. And on the other hand, applying that. And we apply that in 3 terms. On the one hand, we work with endangered species like jaguars. And to save jaguars, we have to work with the local people, and it is amazing that we can really increase the protection of the land and the jaguars by increasing the well-being of the local people. When we see indigenous people in this term, I don't use indigenous people in Mexico. I use rural people, because in Mexico most of the people are not indigenous anymore. They are a mixture of Spanish, Mexican, and so on, but they're rural. They live in the rural areas, and they are the ones who are guarding their land against development. And so our approach has been working with jaguars and other endangered species to protect the land. And by protecting the land, we're creating wealth for the local people. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, we create reserves and so on, because we know by creating reserve, we will contribute to maintaining the local well-being on the one hand, but also to contribute to the well-being of the whole country. Just to give you an idea, we managed in 2023 to increase the Calakmul reserve by, it was already 700,000 hectares, around 1.87 million acres. We doubled the size of the reserve. But in Mexico, the government very wisely don't expel the people from the protected area. So the Mexican government doesn't have any land left. So you have to work with the local people. So we work with them. We convince them that this was a perfect way to maintain the forest. They teach us so many things. And at the bottom line, we have a gigantic reserve that we are protecting jaguars and so on. Throughout my years of research, we have been able to create, as Alejandra said, the first Endangered Species Act in Mexico. In the US, you add one species at a time. In Mexico, we create the Endangered Species Act, and we put 3,000 species or more as endangered in 1 year. And that has been a backbone for conservation. We also create, and I help to create with the government, the environmental impact assessment process in Mexico and the National Commission of Protected Areas. So what I have been grateful and have been very lucky is that I have been able to combine conservation with my activities of research. And what I can tell you is that the times where we're living are really difficult, but on the one hand, but on the other hand, we're creating a lot of opportunities that if we add them together, we will be able to probably avoid the collapse of civilization on the one hand, and on the other hand, saving literally biodiversity in the planet. I will finish with my intervention with this, Alejandra, saying that for me, my goal in life is to protect as many species from extinction as possible, many species of plant and animals, wild plant and animals from extinction. And while doing that, we have to work with the local people. That's a great gift on the one hand. And on the other hand, we have to work with the structure, with the public policy, so we can change that. We can change create the legal framework. So what we're doing at the local scale, like in this case in Calakmul, for instance, can become like the law or the guiding principles in the whole country. And the guiding principles are based on protecting biodiversity, protecting the local well-being, will eventually protect the whole country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerardo. I think we can open 3 minutes for questions to Gerardo, Marina, or do you want to wait until all the interventions? Let me know. Yeah, at the end. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So, okay, good. Now, I would like to invite Diana Isabel Lepe Sanchez to jump into the conversation. She will speak in Spanish, but we have our translator, Aitana Amezcua, that she will help us with that. Before introducing Diana, I would like to give you a little bit of a brief reference from where she's coming from. She's a psychology from the University of Guadalajara in Mexico, and he has a tremendous experience in peace building and peace education, community psychology, popular education, conflict resolution, positive conflict transformation, mediation, supporting in territorial defense, that this is a huge issue in Mexico, cooperative games, security for human rights defenders, another kind of problem very sensitive in Mexico, psychosocial support in context of socio-political violence, and community work. She works for Serapaz. It's a Servicios de Asesoría para la Paz. It's an organization in Mexico that looks for building peace in conflict areas in Mexico, that has worked for since 2013. Saying that, I would like to invite Diana to talk. Diana, bienvenida. Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. Aitana va a hacer la traducción de tu participación. Te agradecemos muchísimo que estés aquí. Les di un poco una idea de tu background. Y bueno, go ahead, adelante. El foro es tuyo, por favor. Gracias.
Muchas gracias a todas, a todos, a todes. Thank you very much por estar acá. Yo quisiera hablarles a partir de las preguntas que fueron colocando sobre la conexión en los territorios y lo que implica en territorio su conjunto, que son los que habitan también los pueblos y comunidades indígenas, y que muchos de estos territorios son los que por siglos han sido cuidados, ¿no? Y que hoy con el desarrollo tecnológico, estos han ido, tecnológico y bueno, y demás, han ido deteriorándose rápidamente, ¿no? Desde el trabajo que hemos hecho en Serapaz, una de los grandes aprendizajes que tenemos tiene que ver con cómo reconocemos que es pues son pueblos que de origen están en estos territorios y que muchas veces me detengo un momento.
Please. Gracias. Aitana, sí, por favor.
Hi, so I'm going to be doing, hi everyone, I'm Aitana. I'm going to be doing the translation. So it starts with, she's thanking everyone very much for being here, and she's going to be speaking today about the connections that Indigenous people have to their territory, which for centuries has been truly taken care of. But nowadays, with technology, industrialization, we're starting to see a very fast deterioration of these places, very often because of the prioritizations that we have with the urban cities and development rather than the taking place of the environment itself.
Gracias, Aitana. Y en ese sentido, pues hablar de la conexión con los territorios, donde al menos acá en México, la cosmovisión o el sentido del territorio no se refiere a la tierra que se pisa, sino a un sentido más profundo que tiene que ver con la conexión no solo con las plantas y con los animales, sino con la energía misma que hay en ellos. Y es que es ahí donde entender la vida que los pueblos y comunidades indígenas le dan, pero también reciben en ese contexto. Es importante que en esa cohabitación se reconozcan como ellos han sido no solo cuidadores y cuidadoras, sino también guardianes de estos territorios.
Okay.
Y, adelante.
Please. Aitana.
So part of what she's going to be talking about is with this connection that Indigenous people have to their land and to the territories. But when we're speaking of territories, it's way beyond just physical land that we can step on or the trees that we see, the plants, but it is the relationship that exists between people and nature. It is the what goes beyond people. It's how nature interacts with itself, and as we're a part of nature, how that is a part of it. We're talking about Indigenous people not only as inhabitants of this territory, but as truly as the protectors of the territory. And yeah.
Y cómo entonces cuando entramos otras y otros a intervenir en esos territorios, a convivir en esos territorios durante mucho tiempo, se ha hecho trabajo en ellos en pro del avance, el desarrollo, de mejorar sus condiciones de vida para ellos, pero sin ellos, ¿no? O sea, en una mirada en la que se hace pensando en su bien y sin embargo no se construye y ha sido un lento proceso de reconocimiento y ahí hay una justicia que tenemos en deuda con ellas y ellos sobre cómo reconocemos su conocimiento, su sabiduría y, y en el marco de integrarlos en los procesos de co-construcción de aquello que soñamos como idea de mundo y también cómo se hace práctico, eso qué significa al momento de pensar por ejemplo, el cuidado de las semillas, de pensar en qué procesos ancestrales de siembra o de caza permiten regresar la vida y no solo se centran en eliminarla, ¿no? Entonces, ese ha sido un gran reto cuando hablamos del trabajo con ellos, porque además el no contemplarlo genera o ha generado conflictos.
Okay, okay. Aitana?
So when we have projects that deal with developing the territories in which these Indigenous communities live in, very often the projects have been done without them, but for them. And when we don't include when we don't include them in these efforts, then very often we're doing it in a very different lens of life that doesn't actually benefit or take into account what they need to live in these lands. So today we have to change this framework. By this, we need to bring in the knowledge and the expertise of Indigenous communities when it comes to working in the land. We have to understand and acknowledge the value that their expertise come with. Very often, whether this is when it comes to hunting, whether this comes to anything that has to do with planting, we have to understand that very often their way of life goes just beyond the immediate reward of getting something, but it goes back into being reciprocal. So we have to make sure that we're doing that and that we are incorporating back into the narrative.
Y esos conflictos que se expresan muchas veces en disputas por división de tierra, pero o por el cuidado o el desarrollo para poblaciones más amplias, cómo no pasa en el momento de abordar estos conflictos solamente por el material, digámoslo de alguna forma, por el recurso, que es la tierra puntual, que es el agua puntual, sino por una serie de elementos de vida que, como decía hace rato, lo tienen integrado por completo y que entonces no es solo el agua, sino es la vida que da el agua al correr y cómo hay esta conexión con el cuidado de la misma. O el bosque, que no es solo la madera que se saca, sino que significa el lugar también de donde se reproduce, donde se cuida, de donde se come, de donde también se nace el agua, ¿no? Entonces, cómo ha sido un reto al dialogar con gobiernos o con diversos actores, que se comprenda que no es solo la tierra, que no es solo el agua, que no es solo el bosque, sino que tiene un sentido cultural profundo.
Very often when we see conflicts between Indigenous people for land, and this is with Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities, Very often it is for land divisions, land divisions, and this is very often when it comes to the resources of the land, whether that is the wood, the soil, the water, etc. But when we're dealing with Indigenous communities, we have to constantly remind ourselves that we're not only dealing with the resources, because they have a framework in which the resources go beyond just what they are. So water is not just water, but it's a source of life. Same with trees, same with plants. This goes on and on. This very often creates conflict between governments and getting the government to understand that when we're talking about these land divisions, it goes way beyond just the measurement of the land, how many kilometers it is, where the line gets drawn or not. But it is this emotional, cultural, and transgenerational relationship between the people and their land.
Y bueno, y en ese sentido, creo que dos retos importantes es por un lado, cómo se hace justicia mucho del devastamiento que en nuestra ignorancia y división como humanidad hemos generado, ¿no? Y por tanto, cómo hacemos justicia en torno a reconocer sus conocimientos más profundos en esa relación y cómo en ese sentido podemos también caminar junto con ellos en la construcción de alternativas y propuestas, no para ellos, sino con ellos, en un diálogo que reta, porque los sentidos de vida sí han sido construidos distintos, ¿no? Entonces, eso no es menor, suena fácil, pero llegar a ese entendimiento común de dos miradas de mundo y de ser y de estar, es un reto grande, importante, fuerte y creo que a la vez complejo y bello. Entonces, pues muchas gracias a todas y a todos. Un placer estar aquí. Gracias por invitarnos.
Muchísimas gracias, Diana.
I like to say something. Can I say something?
Please.
Okay, well, I come from a completely different perspective. On the one hand, for instance, in Mexico, there are very few indigenous people. Most of them are rural people. I mean, people who have been, they are not anymore Mayas or Nahuatl. So, and the way to approach conservation and help them is, on the one hand, I don't think they have better wisdom or worse wisdom than most of the people. I think they have their own wisdom. And what we try while working with them and protecting nature is give them the opportunity to speak up, to raise their voice, I mean the noise of a society who is involved in so many other things. What I'm trying to say is like working with the local rural area people and with biodiversity has allowed us to really create some models where we can really help us and help them to raise the voice on two important issues. One is protecting biodiversity, and the second one is protecting the local people and their customs. Let me tell you something that may sound really strange, but I think everything is related to the population density, human population density. In the Yucatan Peninsula where we work, there was no tropical forest left 100 years ago because the Mayas has destroyed the whole thing because they have to use it, the forest, to create the pyramids and the stucco and so on. So it is not inherently bad. People are not inherently bad or wrong or good. What it happens, as long if population continue to grow with no limits, either locally, regionally, or globally, we won't be able to solve the problem. So part of the solutions that we're giving is working with them and helping them to have benefits for conserving their land. And some of the benefit is to have access to health. And through that, they can have better manage their own decisions. So one of the important things I think of this kind of meetings is to recognize that there are three important principles destroying the planet. One is human population, the number of human population and the growth. Second is consumption, and third is technology. I'm working, for instance, in the rural areas in Mexico where there are very few indigenous people, but I mean, many rural people. Most of them, they want to have a TV, a fridge, a car, a bicycle, and so on. What becomes incredibly difficult is how can I tell them that to have a fridge and to have a car or to have a better house or to have a better possibilities will how can I say no if that locally will really benefit them, but globally will impact? So what we have been doing is work with them, and at the bottom line, it can be important compromises. But those compromises the first point to recognize is that these people has the right to increase their access to technology and so on as the rest of us. And I will finish, but my experience has been working closely with them. You can reach really good compromises where there is a better health, better facilities, better jobs, you know? And I think it's a really big problem when we think that them, the rural or the indigenous people, should be kept aside without access to many of the things that are now cosmopolitan will be solve the problem. I think what will solve the problem is to work closely with them to find out ways where they can use the resources without destroying them on the one hand, but on the other hand, by creating wealth so they can have better standard of living.
Thank you very much, Gerardo. Aitana, could you just add the last part to finish this conversation, please?
Yes, so just going back to Diana's last point, and this was in the topic about land disputes, specifically relating to Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. There are two main challenges that typically arise when dealing with land disputes. One of them is how to deliver justice to people whose land has been taken and whose knowledge and expertise is often undervalued and diminished. We need to find ways to walk alongside these communities and work with them, not on them, creating spaces in which dialogue from the two very different worldviews, or what often is portrayed as two very different worldviews, can collaborate to build another world. The other challenge is that these conversations are not often easy. They're very challenging, or they can be very challenging when we choose not to be open into listening to a different perspective that applies what we think to be right in a very different font. But in the end, only by engaging in these sometimes very difficult conversations can we move forward to have a better world, one that fully incorporates Indigenous peoples and their knowledge in every aspect of life.
Thank you very much, Aitana. And with this, and with the intervention of Gerardo, I would like to highlight the commonplace that from any perspective, it's like the highlight, the insight that at least from my side, I can hear. Okay, and with that, I would like to ask Dr. Alexander Laszlo to jump into the conversation. He has great experience in Mexico. I read that you been part of the Tecnológico Monterrey. That is great. So please, and yeah, everybody knows his profile. So I prefer to give him the microphone, and please jump in.
Thank you. I'm not sure if everybody doesn't know my profile. Here it is. Okay, done with my profile. Good. Hi. Just wanted to say, these are important conversations. And yes, we need to have fun as well, but this is serious fun. This is not trivial fun. Learning to dance together. This is so much of what many communities still do. Whether they are the rural communities that Ger is talking about, or more indigenous communities that Diana is talking about, we have forgotten how to dance together. Often some of the practices when people come together in more traditional societies and communities, they will say, first we must dance. And why? Because there's a form of communing. If we sit down at the table and we start talking in words, we miss each other. We're not really humaning well. So doing things that allow us to see who the other is, I think this is what Diana was calling for very, very much here as well. How do we, and what Aitana was just now mentioning, being able to see different worldviews. It is really hard to do when you are functioning from your own worldview. It's trying to see another paradigm from within your own it is impossible. But if you have open heart, and if you're willing to listen, not to judge, yes, to discern, but not to judge, then you can have new vistas, new panoramas. And, we need to see things with fresh eyes. This is absolutely so. Because the things that we are seeing now, in terms of our displacement, in terms of the way we are dealing with nature and so on, the fresh eyes don't mean new, brand new, different. It means remembering as well. And for this, the kind of sensibility that Diana was talking about was calling us to listen for, being able to listen to the land. So some of these more traditional ways of being help us remember how to do that, how to listen to the land. And we're going to have a whole hour on this coming right up. But when we're looking at this in the context of the cities as well, there are traditions and ways of being that can seem to displace other humans, can displace nature, can displace future generations. This kind of displacing, it's not good. So I think one of the things I would like to bring us into remembering and into sort of, remember we said the recuerdos del porvenir, these memories of things yet to come, is knowing when things are in healthy relationship. It's not a knowing that you need to get from books, but it's a knowing that you have in yourself. You come to this knowing when you listen to others and you listen to nature with a discerning mind, not with a mind that judges, but with one that senses into our common humanity and our senses of part of the web of life, as they talk about it, right? So learning to listen to each other, learning to listen not just across the languages. That is something we were doing right here today. And thank you, Aitana, for the translations. It's awesome. But also learning to listen even through the translations or even without them. Where's this person coming from? And then learning to listen to what the trees are saying. It's a beautiful book by Aldo Leopold called Think Like a Mountain. Learning to listen to the mountains. What are they saying? Right? So being in this relationship, in some traditions it's called right relationship, but it's not righteous. It's a way of simply aligning and tuning. The last thing I want to say on this is whether we think about this as indigenous peoples, we want to think about this as traditional communities, as wisdom cultures. There's so many ways of framing it, right? Of contemporary rural peoples like Ger was talking about. I think fundamentally it's a humility to be able to live simply so that others may simply live. If we all have those high-tech refrigerators and everything that Ger was, maybe he was talking about those specific, basic human needs for sure. But what is enough? To be able to tell a people, you can't have these first world accommodations and these first world technologies. That's not fair. No. But the question is, how do we meet each other in a place where it's not a matter of giving up. It's a matter of learning how to live with, again, living more simply. Living simply so that others may simply live. And there's so much to learn from buen vivir, from the ways of living in right relationship with nature and with each other, from Latin America. Such a richness of remembering that it's more than just the price of the goods. Like Diana was saying, water isn't just water to be to take a shower with, and the forests and the trees are not just wood for construction. This is our living spaces. When we listen for that, then we remember how to be in right relationship. And I think this connectathon has a lot to do with connecting ourselves in that humility, in that way. And this session in particular, what I'm loving about this, and Alejandra, thank you so much for facilitating this. It's all about remembering the wisdom of buen vivir, the wisdom of what we can learn from, particularly in this case, the Latin American ways of being and the ways of being that antedated the Latin American ways of being. Frankly, both the words Latin and American are new concepts, right? There were people here before either of those. And remembering that, connecting ourselves to these places, very, very, very important. So just wanted to end with that plea that we learn to listen, and to listen with the heart, not just with the head, and to listen to each other and to nature. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alexander. I like this part of the dance, and I would like to connect with your new or ultimate research I found. Syntony as an organizing force in societal evolution. So yeah, I found that very, very interesting. Thank you for this. And now I would like to invite Aitana to jump in, and if you want to ask to the guest some questions, give us your feedback, your concerns. How do you see the senior behavior in the middle of this polycrisis? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. As Alejandra just said, my name is Aitana. I am a third-year student in the University of Toronto, and I was born and raised in Mexico, but now I live in Canada. So the area that I do want to focus in first, and a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be reiterated from Alexander, Gerardo, and Diana, and their amazing contributions. So mine is just going to be trying to just live up to that for a little bit. But the question that was asked to me was, how do I envision that my generation can rebuild regenerative projects that are connected with the soul of the land in the middle of a global democratic threat? And well, when I think about my generation and our role in regeneration, I have to reflect on the amount of democracies that we've watched shake and sometimes break. My generation has seen polarized societies. We're living in one right now. We've seen corruption scandals, authoritarian pushes. But we've also seen that even when the institutions falter, local action never ends. Communities continue to plant, rebuild, and remember. It is that survival instinct that will be our greatest tool. For young people like me who were raised in different worlds, for me being born in Mexico City, and now I lived there till I was 13 years old, and now in Canada, this perspective has definitely been sharpened. I've witnessed two systems which have tried to grapple with their colonial legacies and their environmental collapses or their environmental struggles. And what I've learned from this, and very, very similar to what our panelists have already said, is that regeneration cannot be just airdropped. It will not fall into someone's lap and then immediately everything will be solved. It has to start from the lived and place-based knowledge. We have to incorporate the local communities if we hope to understand how local systems work. In this, we have to ask instead of answer first. We cannot just show up to a place expecting that we already know how everything works, how that we understand all the complexities, that we understand the different worldviews. We truly do have to sit down and ask the people that are already there. In Mexico, I've seen communities respond constantly to crisis, whether this is gendered violence, racism, climate displacement. And something very valuable from, and I don't want to limit it just to Mexico, but that I've seen in Mexico, is that Mexicans very often will not wait for perfect conditions to take action. After the major earthquake in 2019, we saw people go out immediately. They build memorials. After a flood, they'll plant new crops. They will rebuild after floods. So my generation, but I think that this applies to everyone, we cannot just expect for perfect conditions to just fall upon us for us to take action. It has to be in the midst of chaos that we take action. In Canada, similarly, I've seen another form of resistance, and this comes with the Indigenous nations reclaiming their land and legal recognition, insisting on ecological health and sovereignty to have sovereign over their own communities. So in these ways, young people like myself, especially who have lived in different parts of the world, we have something unique to offer. We have tools that we have learned from living in different places. We have different legal frameworks. We have digital platforms. But something that we have to be very mindful is to not show up as experts. When we show up in order to help communities, we have to show up understanding that the people that live there already know how their communities work. And we cannot just arrive somewhere and impose our own beliefs onto others, as it was said, quite frankly, by everybody else. And I think that once we understand that humility is not weakness, but it is the beginning of solidarity, then we can help to bridge that local wisdom and global resources. But it cannot happen without the humility and without understanding that everyone has something to learn from each other. I think that the power of storytelling is also another core tool. Communities document memories, whether that be of drought, forced migration, of their reactions to threat, that creates a moral anchor in a community. And very often, these oral transmissions of knowledge tend to be seen as less valuable. And I think we do truly need to go back and listen to whether they are elders, to the stories of the lands. Of a great privilege that we have now with my generation is the role of social media and of the internet, because while these stories are local, they do not have to stay localized. We have the power to share them with the world. So we have to use this new way of having these technologies, not to overpower other communities, but to share their knowledge with the world, and to hopefully then have some cooperation from everywhere we can. And in that way, we can serve as connectors. People like myself, we have the privilege of knowing multiple languages. We can move between geographies and academic frameworks. We can translate from the very local languages to that what we see as the language of policy. When we have these skills, I think it is our moral responsibility to use them to help the most amount of people, but always understanding that our perspective of success is not what everyone's perspective of success is, and we have to be open to understanding these different frameworks. Ultimately, I think that regeneration, it's not just about this idea of fixing the land, but it's about rebuilding a trust that has been broken through centuries. It's about holding space for diverse histories, healing, and new economies that can endure the challenges of democratic uncertainty. I think that if we lead with curiosity and respect, then the initiatives that we create can help build survival political storms that can still belong to the people and the land.
Thank you very much, Aitana. So we have 1 minute to close. I would like to say thank you to all of you for your contribution. I think that the need of connecting, hearing each other, and find common places to dance is there. And yeah, it's the place where maybe we can build on in our futures conversations about the things that we are doing in Mexico, for future projects as we have been done before. Thank you very much.